intro.
Hi, everyone. Thanks for coming back. This is Ken Shoulders number 55. And what we're going to look at today is EVOs, exotic vacuum objects, or charge clusters in nature, essentially. So I have something that a little short that's on my channel that really shows it in action. And then we're going to go into something that I was there live taking these screenshots when Bob Grenier presented something that is pretty phenomenal. That's got to do with charge clusters and how they actually basically put oxygen into our blood, which is a pretty awesome thing. And what we're about to see here, Brandon, if you want to bring that up, this is on my channel called Technology Envoy, and it's
Let me
in
just
this.
okay.
It's in the shorts. So if someone wants to go back and find it or share it again, but I'll let Brandon just
Um,
play it. Maybe we'll go from the beginning again.
Let me just.
Um,
I have to do it on my desktop because my I have to do it on my laptop, but my desktop doesn't have volume. So
I, yeah,
let's
I don't
just
know if there's any volume on it, but it
yeah.
shows the actual charge clusters. I'm sorry that I can't see it. It's too small for me to see, but you guys should be able to see the.
Um,
Yeah, these tiny drops nucleate coming off the
um,
leaf, correct?
um,
I what it says is this is the plant producing oxygen, which is
Yeah.
absolutely correct. But I think that it's actual charge clusters that are being created, and what's really
I'll put it
important
put it in the
is
chat.
is okay. What's really important is to look at the spacing of these little charge clusters coming off because they are absolutely perfectly spaced, which means that there's some kind of a pulsing of the aura, which is magnetohydrodynamics, which is a direct energy conversion from the aura. And I think with that pulsing, this is where you get the charge clusters happening. So let's see it. Yeah, let's see if we can watch it.
Um, Let me just get it up. So here it's on this. So what should we do? So I'll just like let's do that again. See.
Are you guys able to see the charge clusters coming off?
Yes. They're
Okay.
moving quite fast.
Yeah, and notice the spacing too. How the intervals between them is like absolutely perfect. Cool.
So
So now
I'll
we can jump into the presentation, which Chip, thank you, is going to read. And again, this was from Bob Grenier. Now, the very first shot here is kind of important because we talk about how there's a ring within a ring, essentially. And here you can actually see that there's 48. He calls them Tor, but basically this is a charge cluster with 48 in the geometry itself. And you can actually see them, how they're tangential or at 90 degrees to the other charge cluster, which is going this way. These ones are going this way.
My
From
God.
Matsumoto.
Yeah. Toroid within a toroid.
Yeah, it's always about, yeah, different layers of them, right?
Creating tension in space-time.
So you can go ahead and start reading the slides.
Fractalized subdivisions have subdivisions. Huh. Matsumoto. All right. Unpublished from negatives adjacent to other typical electrolysis witness marks. And Matsumoto is a Japanese researcher.
Okay.
talking about subdivisions and fractalization, the whole darn thing in smaller divisions.
So doesn't that kind of lead to subquantum kinetics in a lot of ways too? Because you have,
The fractal. Yeah.
right, you have the quantum, and now you have below the quantum, you have below the Planck length. Tremendously below the Planck length is where the etherons are essentially, right? So those little guys there are known as EVOs, or charge clusters, but the smaller version of those are etherons essentially, which form the main building block of our universe called the Turing wave, right? From Paul Laviolette's work. Yeah.
So this is something from Paul's work.
No, these are screenshots that I took live when Bob Greenyer was doing a presentation.
Okay.
So this is stuff that he came up with essentially. So we can just go through, and there's
All
lots
right.
of really great things in here. When it says EC, that's basically a charge cluster or exotic vacuum object. It's just a different scientist calling it something different.
Electron charge clusters. Electron charge clusters.
Well, they're calling them energy clusters.
All right.
Yeah.
Magnetotoroidal electric radiation, MTEI. There's some bullets here. First one, clusters have the ability to absorb electrons and ions without exhibiting a total charge. We call such structures energy clusters. Okay, second bullet, ECs or energy clusters create traces of so-called strange radiation on the surface of photoemulsions. A bird and or an umbrella, explosive unpacking of a cluster with the release of large number of electrons, including accelerated ones. Second bullet, subbullet, curved track, photo 18, trace of a cluster crawling along the surface of the film. Next subbullet, trace of the protector, photo 19, which is also a trace of an energy cluster crawling along the surface of the film, but with mechanical penetration into its body. Okay, next subbullet, traces of round spots, photo 3 and photo 16, 3 through 16, are associated with the fact that the energy cluster, when interacting with paper fibers, begins to crumble into smaller vortices, which when losing energy leave traces of round spots. Okay. Number 4,
Unspot.
ECs. Yeah, energy clusters, ECs, settle on luminescence centers, nucleate on luminescence centers, which leads to a decrease in the brightness of the luminescence of the phosphors. Okay. Next bullet. When mechanical and or electrical impact is applied to the EC, the cluster unpacks, explodes with the emission of accelerated to 6 keV, 1,000 electron volts to 8,000 electron volt radiation. This explains the appearance of X-ray radiation near cavitators and cavitating jets of liquids. Wow, tying it down to everything in the foundation here. All right. 6, ECs are attached to the surface of dust particles. Therefore, with a high concentration of clusters, large destructive explosions of dust, methane, and fuel vapors are possible.
Mm.
Just like we saw the water nucleate, the oxygen nucleate in the water coming off the plant.
Mm.
Coal open casts at great depths, more than 500 meters. In coal open casts at great depths, more than 500 meters, ECs generated in the depths of the earth are capable of accumulating in micro cracks of the coal seam. When the seam is unloaded, crack begins to increase in size, which leads to a chain reaction of EC explosion with explosive synthesis and subsequent destructive explosion of methane. Fractal emission, maybe. Okay,
Mm.
ECs are capable of accumulating. This is all highlighted. ECs are capable of accumulating on the surface of detectors. In particular, the neutron, going to the next page.
It's the next page. Is that just okay? Okay, it's the next page, right? That's fine.
Mhm.
Is that fine for the next page?
I don't know
And
if
there,
I had all the pictures lined up
Let me
that
just let
they.
me just let me just look in the
No,
thing.
it's correct, Brendan. Just keep going.
okay,
Yeah,
so there's an image here unpublished from negatives adjacent to the cold fusion stars and black white holes. Green years on the inset, and the image, a pair of black white holes. That's interesting.
Nitrogen
Uh,
iodide. Is that Ni? Nitrogen iodide? Water?
looks like it. Water, yeah,
yeah.
0.5 moles per liter. Potassium carbonate electrolysis.
So the reason I chose this one is because it talks about black holes and black holes are my pet peeve, big time, because they've got it wrong. There's not a black hole at our galactic core; it's a mother star. But where the black hole and white hole thing does come into play is when EVOs transmute from a black EVO to a white EVO. So this is where things start happening essentially. So it's just all about terminology, and that's kind of why I included this one in there. Yeah, so we can just keep going. This is in particular really the crux of what I was wanted to show everyone.
Okay.
Yeah,
There's 4 or 5 bullets here. Number 9, high concentration of energy clusters leads to computers freezing, failure of electronic components and circuits due to explosions on the surface of the EC, and accidents in electrical networks.
interesting, right?
No shit. Wow.
Hmm.
10, ECs contained in the blood vessels and capillaries of all living beings and plants. In the body of mammals, birds, reptiles, fish, in addition to blood flow and lymph flow, there is energy flow. Okay. Number 11, EC supplies the body cells with clean energy in the form of electrons. Therefore, water with an increased concentration of EC has high healing properties.
Structured water,
Emphasized, yeah,
right?
structured water in yellow, emphasized. All right, number 12, the energy ocean of charged clusters behaves like a thick gel. So it can be assumed that the biologic effect of the fourth state of water, discovered by Gerald Pollack, is associated with ECs. Energy clusters with accumulated electrons, as a rule, accumulate at the boundary of the medium. Imagine that, event horizon. Therefore, boundary water is water with a high concentration of electric charges, energy charges. When a photon interacts with a cluster, the latter easily gives up an electron. Therefore, the explanation for the appearance of a current between the boundary and bulk water when irradiated with infrared radiation is quite understandable. Yeah, connecting all the dots. Number 13, a separate topic is the biologic impact of phantoms from the EC. 13.1, 1989, A.F. Ochatron published an article on microclusters and ultralight particles, reference 15. The author discovered that bodies of the revolution involve certain microclusters in motion, okay, creating a rotating phantom, apparently in the form of a vortex funnel.
Imagine that, hey?
After the body of, on the next page, after the body of concentration of ET has high healing properties. Actually, I messed that up. Actually,
Yeah, it's
after the
probably the
concentration
next
of
page.
a charged clusters behaves like a thick gel, so it can be
Oh yeah,
assumed to be of the fourth state of matter. I'm going to have to fill in some stuff on the left here.
yeah.
Discovered by Gerald Pollack, is assumed to be associated with accumulated electrons. As a rule, accumulate the boundary. The boundary layer of water is a high concentration of ECs. When a photon of the latter easily gives up an electron, that interaction occurs at the boundary event, at the event horizon. Therefore, the explanation for the appearance of a current between the boundary and bulk water when irradiated, the infrared radiation is quite understandable. That's a repeat, 13, 13.1, Apologize. We'll get back down here to 13.1. Okay, so these are new. After the body of revolution stopped, the phantom in the middle of 13.1, this phantom continued to be live for at least 20 days. Oh my God. I assume that the phantom is created from energy clusters. When an organism enters the field of such a phantom, the energy clusters of the energy flow are literally torn out of the organism by the moving clusters of the phantom. The part of the organism damaged by the phantom rapidly loses immunity with all of the ensuing consequences. I experienced the negative impact of the phantom from the hydrodynamic machine in the summer of 2018. A phantom of EC is formed around any body. The longer the body is in one place, the more stable the phantom. A seriously ill person creates a stable phantom with all its ailments. Therefore, in hospitals, it is necessary to periodically destroy such phantoms, for example, with the help of electric spark dischargers.
Next page.
Conclusions on the characteristics of these phantoms
Sorry,
associated with Ken shoulders.
just do
Go
that.
on.
I'll just do that. I'll just do that.
So a little bit, it bleeds on to the next page, I think here. The conclusions on the characteristics of energy clusters associated with Ken shoulders. The conclusions there, they are in yellow. On the characteristics of energy clusters are confirmed by the discovery of the U.S. experimental physicist Ken Shoulders, who in the late 80s and early 90s of the last century filed 5 U.S. patents for the technology of forming high-density charge clusters.
Which
In
we have all of those, by the way. We can go through them at some point.
all the patents, yes.
Yeah.
Yeah. In his opinion, these charge clusters are not plasma. They claim to be a special state of matter called by Shoulders electrum volitum, EVs, which can be translated as strong in unity. In experiments with pulsed high voltage generators on his simplest devices, Shoulders achieved stable production of charge clusters, carefully studied their behavior, calculated specific parameters of the clusters, outlined a number of areas of application, and most importantly, established that during the existence of a charge cluster, it releases much more energy than is spent on its generation. In particular, Shoulders established the charge energy cluster exists in the form of oscillating spherical monopoles,
Bingo.
or as electron plasmoids with discrete energy levels, or as soliton electromagnetic containers.
And I just want to intervene here and say that Ken Shoulders was Chris Beskar's business partner. And that was classified for a very, very long time, up until about 4.5 years ago when I started bringing it out to the public. Stavati has been in secret programs for over 30 years, up till that point. And all the information and the reason why we're doing these Ken Shoulders, like number 55 today, is because Chris Beskar gave us all of Ken Shoulders' research. So he's the man. And the other thing about Ken Shoulders is people have heard the term 0 point energy. Well, Ken Shoulders coined the term 0 point energy. So he's a rock star, superstar in all of this, along with Chris Beskar.
And so that's exactly what this statement says just above. I'll repeat it.
Yeah.
Most importantly, established that during the existence of a charge cluster, it releases much more energy than is spent on its generation.
Free energy. Doesn't that sound like free energy over unity?
That's what caught Chris's attention. Okay, now we can do something with this damn thing. All right. Electromagnetic containers, blah, blah, blah. Characteristic size of a charge cluster is 1/10 of a micrometer. Therefore, 1 cubic centimeter of space contains up to 10 to the 15th clusters. That's peta. We're beyond tera. That's a peta. Wow. Each cluster contains 10 to the 8th or to 10 to the 11th electrons and 10 to the 3rd to 10 to the 5th ions. So I did not know the ionic cloud was attendant to the actual charge cluster. How we missed that in the past, Dad? That's amazing. All right. But that's what makes them work. It's those freaking heavy ions. Okay. 2014 at the Federal State Budgetary Scientific Institution, the Research Institute of Occupational Medicine, on the initiative of the author in the decisive report of the Russian Academy of Sciences, the Ministry of Defense of the Russian Federation, an experiment was conducted on the effects of SHS and MTAC on biological objects. The goal of the preliminary stage was to study the clinical condition, blood system, and pathomorphological indicators in laboratory animals exposed to an acute single exposure to SHS and MTEC. A corona streamer discharge generator with a power consumption of no more than 500 watts was used as a source of SHS and MTEC, as in photo 22. Below are excerpts from the report. All right, so these are just notes. 16 nonlinear white male rats weighing approximately 200 grams were used in the laboratory test. The animals were divided into one main experimental and one control group of 8 animals each. The duration of the period of exposure to biologic objects was 2 hours and 30 minutes. Okay, underlined in yellow. Since the animals were not fed before the experiment, after the end of the exposure, the rats were given water for 30 minutes to exclude the effect of water deprivation on blood viscosity and hematological parameters. Okay, next page. Pathomorphological studies of rats were carried out immediately after laboratory tests using generally accepted methods in order to assess macroscopic changes in internal organs due to the influence of the studied factor. Euthanasia of rats was performed by the decerebriation method, dissection of the cervical vertebrae without damaging the integrity of the trachea. After the death of biological objects, an autopsy of the abdominal cavity and chest was performed. The abdominal organs were examined and then the lung preparation was removed. The presence of pathological changes as hemorrhages, emphysema, etc., was determined on the pleural surface of the lungs by inspection. So he looked at the lungs very carefully. All right. As a result of the pathomorphological studies of a group of rats exposed to the studied factor, an increase in the time of cardiac automatism up to 10 minutes after euthanasia was revealed in comparison with animals of the control group. They didn't die. What? Zombies. The automatism of myocardial work was registered not only in exsanguinated corpses of experimental animals, but also in the extracted, separated from the body, heart-lung preparations of the same rats. In addition, an increase in the time of intestinal peristalsis, active movement of loop segments, was found in a number of the biological objects of the main group. Okay, next page. It's affecting the organism right to the base level.
Do you want to say something about that, Eddie? Hold on.
Well, this is basically the test, right? So
Yeah.
I believe half of them were getting were like control, and the other half were actually getting the benefits of
Right.
what it's going to go through.
Right.
Or
I
something.
can see it now.
Yeah.
Okay.
You can see the high voltage insulators. They're made of ceramic and they're like a spark plug where they have these undulations because voltage won't arc across them quite as easily, the high voltage, right? Yeah.
Do you think consciousness, that electricity has something, the electric spark, the electrical activities in the brain, the electric spark, how can that be related to consciousness?
Well, EVO,
Is it the most profound form of consciousness?
Absolutely, because etherons, in Paul's definition, are the conscious agents. So
Like,
everything to
like,
do with spark and spark gaps and anything like that have everything to do
it's like light. It's like light, or
with
like a
etherons.
fire or a spark. So anyway, go on.
Yeah.
Hmm. So this photo caption is irradiation of rats with a corona streamer discharge generator. All right. During sectional studies of animals in the control group, no significant differences from the norm were found. Myocardial automatism either persisted for several seconds or was not registered at all. Intestinal automatism was not visually registered even once. In yellow, highlighted, a visual comparison of test tubes with the blood of experimental animals made it possible to establish that the blood samples of rats exposed to the factor were bright red and not dark brown like those of the control group.
All
Such
from
color changes are characteristic in particular of oxygenation.
this is how
Increase in partial oxygen tension of blood after its passage through the pulmonary circulation and saturation of erythrocytes and oxygen molecules in the pulmonary alveoli. Did you have something, Ed?
this is how it works. This is
Yeah.
how charge clusters, just like that plant, are creating oxygen, but they're doing it in the blood system. And the color of the blood, unfortunately, I didn't have the color pictures with me because they're at home, but the pictures really show the difference. But yeah, carry on.
Okay, I'm going to reread that. It's important. Such color changes are characteristic in particular of oxygenation. All right, this is this effect we saw with a plant. Increase in partial oxygen tension of blood after its passage through the pulmonary circulation and saturation of erythrocytes with oxygen molecules in the pulmonary alveoli, right, the air sacs in the lungs. However, other causes of color changes in hematological samples are possible, which differ from the traditional ones accepted in normal physiology. In addition to the experimental rats from the main group, hemorrhages were detected in the lung tissue of 25% of the cases, constituting approximately 20% of the pleural surface of the lungs. Okay, next page.
I think it kind of starts in the
So
middle there
you
to
left off
describe.
there. You left off there.
Yeah, exactly. The described symptoms.
Right. Described symptoms are typical for high doses of radiation. The organism of the experimental rats was exposed to SHS irradiation, therefore hemorrhages were found in the lung tissue. In yellow, at the same time, the organism of the irradiated rats was saturated with energy clusters. Therefore, the internal organs received energy from electron clusters, which led to an increase in quotes, an increase in the time of cardiac automatism up to 10 minutes after euthanasia compared to the animals of the control group. The automatism of the myocardium was recorded not only in the exanuated corpses of the experimental animals, but also in the extracted, separated from the body, heart-lung preparations of the same rats. Okay, this is a repeat. So this
You all right?
radiation, this
Okay.
radiation was creating life after death in the heart of the rats.
Kinda. Yep.
Yeah, kind of.
And basically, it should be reversing time if it's done
Yes,
properly with negative ions. So yeah, you might say that.
yes. Up to 10 minutes after euthanasia. Hmm. Let's see, where am I? Also, an extractor separating the highlights. In addition, an increase in the should be peristalsis time active movement of loose segments of the intestine was found in a number of biological objects of the main group. So it slowed down movement in the intestine.
Yeah.
I think
Right,
that
next page, please.
peristalsis is misspelled. Anyway,
Yeah,
it should be.
I think it is a repeat page. Someone just said in the
Yeah,
group.
that's a repage. It's
Yeah.
peristasis probably, but anyway.
You have to realize that I was doing this live, taking screenshots live, so some of them, yeah, overlap.
Yeah. All right. So here's a photo. Comparison of blood color of rats in control group versus the irradiated one and number one. And sample two and irradiated number one. So yeah,
So
sample two is dark, I guess. Or
yeah,
excuse
but
me, is normal. The
well,
irradiated one is dark.
no, it's actually the opposite of that. The one that's highlighted there is the irradiated one, and that bright is very, very bright red
I
blood.
read.
And the other
Yes.
one is the control group where it's a lot darker. And that
Yes.
talks to putting oxygen in the blood essentially, which is the charge clusters. But it's this magnetohydrodynamics that is actually used in the process to draw, which is a direct energy conversion from the ether that allows this process to happen. So um, you might get some energy from food and nutrition, but I would say that the energy in your body really comes from charge clusters
Very
interacting
interesting.
with your cells, right? In
And
your
you know
in your
that
blood.
that's analogous to what Ika showed us in the past, remember?
Yeah, exactly. And
With her photomicrographs. Yeah.
we're, having this discussion essentially, right? Yeah,
Yeah, that's excellent. Excellent.
yeah.
Conclusions. All right, here we go. Number one, experimenters, engineers, and technical personnel working on cold nuclear transmutation programs, plasma and ball lightning studies, applied applications of rotation fields, and the creation and operation of nuclear physics installations, including accelerators, are exposed to the mortal risk of radiation. It is necessary to involve scientific teams in the study of the new fundamental phenomena as quickly as possible, with the aim of developing detectors of nitrogen iodide, and I'm not sure what that is, protection against NI, that's a radiation, we have to figure out what that means, protection against NI and safety standards. It's not a chemical. To study the mechanisms of development of the identified biologic effects, as well as to establish their hygienic significance, further targeted multifaceted studies are necessary using several types of laboratory animals, a wider range of experimental methods, as well as correct the symmetry of physical factors and chemical substances generated during electrical corona discharges. Yeah.
And then I included, and we have, I think Pavel's with us right now. I included Pavel's work that we've gone through before, because this all does sort of interconnect, especially when you start thinking about oxygen, for example. In Pavel's models, there are toroidal structures that are the oxygen, but I always remember with his structures, you have one thing spinning one way and you have the other thing spinning the other way, and the actual magic is happening at the null point, essentially. And this is, all of Pavel's stuff. So I thought it'd be interesting just to go through this a little bit more again here.
Yeah.
And if Pavel has any input, certainly jump in, because this
Yeah,
is his work.
I see he's on there. Okay.
Yeah.
All right. So the classical approach in particle physics is based on the fact that the electron has some parameters like charge, mass, etc., but does not have a structure. The electron is calculated as a point particle having magnetic properties. Combining knowledge of physical chemistry, evolutionary optimization, 3D graphics, programming in Python, and mathematics make it possible to create programs for designing new nanostructure models. The first testing proposal for the nanostructure prediction program is limited to carbon structures. Figure 1 are classical and new models of nature. In yellow, emphasize theory, VFRT, vortex fractal ring theory, as in Pavel,
Mhm.
Uses the electron, proton, and neutron as the particle with a toroid ring shape, which is
And-
formed by
yeah.
fractal substructures connected to each other by vortex electromagnetic fields. The atomic nucleus can be built from ring protons and neutrons. Okay, combining knowledge of atomic nucleus structures and evolutionary optimization makes it possible to create programs for designing new nanostructure models. The first testing proposal for the nanostructure prediction program was limited to carbon structures. The aim was to verify whether the proposed program is capable of generating known carbon nanostructures such as graphene. The following versions of the program will no longer have this limitation. And there is the ring structures, proton and electron, diagrammed out with certain symmetries, Bohr model versus the ring model, levitating of the ring electron in the hydrogen atom.
Levitating is kind of an important part of that statement. As in anti-gravity,
Mhm. Yeah.
right?
Basic substructures of atomic nucleus, and there's 5 of them shown here, various perturbations of numbers of rings matched together. We have 4, 6, 8, 10, dodecahedron, 12, it looks like. Left substructure is the helium nucleus, alpha particle. The right substructure is not used in the periodic table of elements. There's 3 substructures, so that in the middle are key. Well, that's
And
an interesting insight.
and this is something I believe it might be Ken Shoulders number 35 when we went through this whole thing. But I just
Yeah,
wanted to bring it up because this is his table of elements essentially that shows these structures. Everything is made of these structures. And remember that the etherons at the very, very smallest level are also the same structure. So it's all fractal, essentially, right?
God almighty, this is amazing. Going from lithium, actually from helium up to cadmium on the bottom. Um, each one of these sacred geometries, if you would, should have a resonant frequency. So I've seen the periodic table also broken down in terms of frequency. If you could invert these geometric structures to the acoustics that generate them on a shaker board, we talked about that last week with the crop circles, right? You would have the unique prime key frequency for each one of the elements in the table.
Yeah.
It's all about frequency.
Yep. At the end of the day, because that's basically what the Turing wave is. Remember that the Turing wave is the frequency of source in our dimension or this galaxy or this universe. Um, and it's all got to do with the dodecahedron and 12, essentially, right? Yeah.
So here's, and I want Pavel to jump in here if he's listening. Hydrogen molecule with covalent bond, topological structures, rings are not in the right scale. But what is interesting here, this is a quantum phenomenon, and he is showing spin in a classical physics sense, it would seem, not as a property or a characteristic, but an
Could ask,
actual,
we could
an
ask Pavel.
actual spin.
We could ask Pavel to say something if he wants to. I mean, I don't know if he wants to.
Yeah.
He may not be here at the moment. He may be some in another room.
Yeah. No, and so that's important because, as you know, spin in a quantum sense is not really motion per se. And it's the most poorly described thing in quantum physics I've ever heard. It's just total BS. So I'd like to hear Pavel's interpretation of quantum spin here, because he
Are you
seems
there,
to have
Pavel?
given it some physicality, which is really a good idea, in my opinion.
Are you there, Pavel? No, he may be in another room.
Yeah.
Maybe
We'll,
not.
we'll have to maybe get him another time, but it is about spin and counter
Yeah,
spin.
hi.
Oh, there we go. Hey, Pavel,
Can
Yes,
Pavel,
hi.
Yeah.
can
can you go
Pavel, can
back?
you
There we
answer
go.
can you answer that very specific question that you have
Yes,
diagrammed here with spin associated with the toroids in the proton, electron, and the proton, the second proton? Is it, do you actually see that as in a classical sense, something that has inertia and angular momentum?
But I think yes, you are right.
Okay. So this immediately gets me very comfortable with what Pavel's shown, because I have hated from day one Niels Bohr's description of spin in a quantum state. He said, what the hell? How could you miss something so important and describe it so poorly? Here, Pavel is showing it as in a classical sense. It has a capital I inertia, and it has omega, angular momentum, velocity, helicity, vorticity, and it's the rate of spin is time, and the angular momentum
Bingo.
is gravity. And now
Yes.
he's got his little gravity engine running here, and hell yes, they're going to levitate.
Yeah. And just for those that don't know, the Starburst Foundation that was founded by Paul Laviolette, and the reason why we're all here basically, Brandon gave Pavel an honorary doctorate of science, which is like a level above a PhD a while ago for this exact work right here, because he's right on the money.
Wow. God,
Yeah,
these
it's
toroids shape space, give the sacred geometry in a sense. You're
yeah, it's
potentiating the volume, the vacuum, excuse me, with with a structure, a
yeah,
geometry
it
that inherently creates the potentum.
it starts at the etheron, which is about 10 to the minus 65th, I think is what we determined. And then charge clusters, they do range in size, but generally about 10 microns is the size that Ken Shoulders was building them at. So that's like the next level. And then ball lightning, can be even feet in diameters. And one thing I do know about all of this is the bigger that you make stuff, the more stable it is. So here's the thing, Ken Shoulders and John Hutchison were really good friends. And the thing about it is, John is not doing it the way that Ken Shoulders is doing it. Ken Shoulders was always trying to make them small. John and others are making them larger because the larger that you make them, the more stable they become. And that's why ball lightning can last for even several minutes, essentially, right? So, yeah, I think that's really important in all of this.
This would seem to also eliminate the dire need in quantum physics, current quantum electrodynamics for the monopole, right? We've been looking for a freaking monopole forever, a magnetic monopole. We don't
Well,
need it if it's
well,
a three-dimensional rotating toroid.
Yeah, but it is still important because if you look at Bob Greener's work and Ken Shoulders and stuff that Chris has shared with me, it's actually that magnetic monopole is real, and it's actually at the heart of everything. And maybe that's something that we can go through next time. Actually, next time
Yes.
I'll be at home, so I'll have all of my papers and whatnot with me. So maybe we can dive into that a little bit more. Other thing is that some of the people in this group actually know Bob Greenyer, including Carmen. Bob was actually here where I am right now at Carmen's house a couple of years ago. And I know that Paul Harris also knows him as well because they did the first replication of the Hutchison effect at Paul's laboratory, which I visited with Ica not long ago, which was totally awesome, by the way. So yeah, very cool. So maybe next time we can jump into that. Does anyone else have any things to add before we stop the recording? Or
Yeah, I think I would clarify the monopole statement maybe in that these toroids are creating the monopole
yeah,
rather than
it,
rather
it
than everybody stomping around trying to figure out how to create a stable monopole from a B field, orthogonal to an electrical field. The toroids do it by definition.
and I think it's
It's
because
beautiful.
there's a non in Bob Greenyer's model. There's a non-radiating area, and I think that the magic is all happening within this area essentially.
Yeah.
And again, we'll dive into it because I have tons and tons of slides and everything that we can show everyone. Yeah, and maybe possibly we can ask if Bob would want to join us at some point here as well. might be pretty interesting to have him in here to do a presentation or be part of one of these presentations or something too. So just
Yeah.
putting that out there, Bob.
Mhm.
Yeah,
That would be cool. That would be
yeah,
awesome. I mean,
yeah, for sure, for sure. Um, yeah, so maybe we'll stop the recording here and then we can carry on with our conversations and whatnot.
Yeah. Okay. Okay. Thank you, everyone. Hope you have a wonderful rest of the day. Cheers. Bye.
Thank you. Bye-bye.